Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, how to spend it. I'm Andy Green.
I am Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Schultz was your father. We have an exciting episode, Felix. Bit going on today. The big chunk, a chat with Bret Curry.
Nice. But before we get there, we've got to knock some things on the head, Andy Green.
Hit him.
First of all, I've got to knock my post on the head. I've been getting packages left, right, and centre. Several of them have been watch related.
Yeah.
And, I got a lovely little Royal Mail package from Anodyne.
Yeah.
I got their little. Is it a newsletter? Is it a journal? It's called Letters from a Cint. I haven't read it all, so I'm not entirely sure what or where a cint is. I'll let you know on that. But it's really good. It's a nice little sort of look into the brand world of Anodyne. And in a similar note, but it must be said, a slightly heftier package, perhaps reflecting the heftier production and infrastructure capabilities of the brand. Letters du Brassus, which...
What's that?
Well, I mean, if you know your manufacture locations, it's either going to be AP or a Blancpain. It's it's a little Blancpain magazine that I manage to get every year, and it's a I don't know if you have to sort of have bought a watch, or I don't know. They just show up on my door sometimes, and it's a really cool look. Like there's a lot of underwater photography and interviews and stuff in there, so that's good. And finally, we're both doing a bit of FedEx tracking at the moment, Andy,
Yeah, we are.
for the next Hodinkee magazine, which is incoming.
Is that volume 6?
6 or 7.
6 or 7.
But do you know what? It's always a bit of a bittersweet moment for me because I have misplaced my first 2 copies. Did I lend them to you? Like issues 1 and 2 that I, back in the day when they were cool. I have a feeling I might have left them in an old place of work or something, but they're
maybe.
gone.
I don't think I ever saw them.
They're gone. Anyway.
Bye.
Nice. So yeah, that's my Mailbag Monday, as they say.
Awesome.
You've been gunning for a mailbag segment, haven't you? Just snuck it in.
Guys, let us know. Email us if you want a bit of a mailbag vibe to the show. And OT, the podcast at gmail.com. Felix, what have you been liking this week?
I've been liking a bit of an old thing that I sort of think of every so often. It's a documentary series called All in the Best Possible Taste. And I think of it surprisingly often. It's from 2012, and it's by an artist by the name of Grayson Perry, who, if you're listening in the UK, you'll probably have heard of. He won the Turner Prize.
Is that Katie's dad?
No. He's a really, really, really interesting guy. So he's sculpture and sort of fabric. He's also publicly a cross-dresser. But again, that sort of plays into his artistic practice. So he sort of examines prejudices, fashions, and foibles. And that was something that very much is in evidence in this documentary series, which looks at class. So like social class. So there's 3 episodes, working class, middle class, and upper class. And Grayson he'll go visit these traditional sort of class-based families, like the aristocratic ones. It's like these sort of landed gentry, and look at what defines that and what it means and how it's changing. And it's a bit of a UK thing because the class system there is a little bit more formalized, say, than in Australia, where it's a bit, we obviously don't have lords that can go back to the 16th century or whatever.
Sure.
But even so, I felt like he in the sort of the middle class one, like there were things that were in it that just like struck me to the core, like talking about homes and taste and what we want and aspirational stuff. It just nails you. It's not always comfortable, but it's really, really insightful. And being an artist, he turns it into a series of tapestries.
Natch.
Yeah. So what have you been into?
Nothing as sophisticated or as deep as that.
Damn right.
But good style nonetheless. Rebecca on Netflix. Have you seen it?
Who's Rebecca? What's Rebecca? Where's Rebecca?
Okay, so I guess it's like a psychological thriller. Netflix made it. Rah rah rah. The description: a young newlywed arrives at her husband's imposing family estate on the windswept English coast and finds herself battling the shadow of his first wife, Rebecca, whose legacy lives on in the house long after her death. So, Lily James is a smashing lead. She's really, really good in it. Really cool to see an actor like that get the spotlight in such a strong film. Arnie Hammer,
Armie Hammer.
actually pretty good.
What a
In
name.
it. Like wow, he can talk, he can act. Very impressive. Also, extra points to the costume department. I love a psychological thriller, but the costume department alone and their efforts makes this worth watching. Really cool tailoring, really cool props, really cool vehicles used. The attention to detail in the whole film is really, really strong. And a lot of people have sort of come out in the last few weeks since it's aired and talked about sort of just the level of like varying detail and like the cars that they use, the outfits that they use, like everything just like lines up. And like I think the car that's sort of the hero of the film has some really cool like legit provenance that actually ties into the story in a cool way. But I really liked it, and 80% of people liked it.
Do you know
according
what?
to Google.
Do you know why they've liked it? Because
Why?
it's. I just did a quick Google. Then it's based on the Hitchcock, or it's a redo of the Hitchcock story of the same name,
Huh? Didn't know that.
by Daphne du Maurier. So it's a psychological thriller. Alfred Hitchcock.
Mm,
Yeah, you should
really
also
good.
add the original. Maybe you can watch that next. Do a little compare and contrast.
Side by side.
Yeah, which the OG's got Laurence Olivier, who I reckon might be a little bit better in the acting department than Arnie Hammer. Is it
Arnie
Arnie?
Hammer was
Arnie or
actually good.
Army? It's
Arnie?
Army. I
I don't
think it's
know.
Army Hammer.
Arnie?
I think it's Army. Just for the
It's
most
Army, isn't
ridiculous
it?
name ever. Hang on.
Oh fuck.
Dad?
Army. Yeah,
Is it Army?
it's Army.
Just imagine going to school. Hi, my name's
Armand.
Army Hammer.
Armand Hammer. We should just call him Armand Hammer. Or his middle name is Douglas. Just call him Douglas Hammer. Um,
Army Hammer. I'm sorry. The next guest on the podcast is going to be Arnie Douglas.
Arnie Douglas. Armand Douglas Hammer.
I think we need
I need a
to.
coffee.
I think we need to have some sort of break.
We need a break. This episode of OT the podcast is brought to you by our sponsor Longines. We're very excited to have them on board. Felix, you've been wearing something on your wrist. What is it?
Well, it's one of the pieces from their new Spirit collection. To be specific, the 40mm automatic with a black dial.
Oh, I love that. Are you going to tell us about it?
I thought I might. So, no surprises. The case is 40mm across, great size. You can get on a leather strap, but this one comes on the quite nice, I've got to say, steel bracelet with a mix of brushed and polished surfaces. When it comes to the dials, this is black, but you can also get it in blue or white. Having said that, I think the black is the most formal option, and the design of the dial, regardless of color, is really, really nice. It's a good, solid grained middle section, distinctively applied Arabic numerals, strong railroad style chaptering. There's also a well integrated date at the 3 o'clock position. On the movement side, it's running off the automatic L888.4. You get 60 hours of power reserve with that and 100 meters of water resistance on the case. In addition, and a feature I really love, is a quick change strap system. To top it all off, Andy, there is 5 years, that's right, 5 years of warranty for peace of mind.
Wow. But you can't wear a spec sheet, Felix. So tell me, how is it on the wrist?
More comfortable than a spec sheet. I'll be frank. No, it's great. It's the size, the dial color, and the fact that it's on steel make this a really, really versatile option. The proportions and design are smart. It's clearly inspired by the past, but it's not stuck in the past, which is exactly where I like my watch design. I'm down for old school dial details like those 5 stars at the bottom, and features like the grippy pilot-inspired ergonomic crown. But I also love the fact that it's got good lume, modern steel bracelet, and I don't have to worry if I ever go swimming because it's got 100 meters of water resistance.
Terrific. Felix, I really do like those bold Arabic numerals, loom filled and super legible. I think that's important when you're talking about pilot or pilot inspired watches. And being a lover of vintage watches, I think the black is probably my pick of the bunch. But one thing we need to talk about, the price.
Yeah. So the Spirit 40 millimeter automatic on leather or bracelet is 3,200 Australian dollars. But Andy, there's also a prestige edition that features both strap options and a bonus leather NATO in a very big fancy box that comes in at 4,150 Aussie.
I got to say, that's pretty solid value. And as you said earlier, this really is a versatile watch. Men, women, work, weekend. I think the Spirit can handle it all. That Prestige kit is pretty tempting, as this is a watch that looks quite different depending on what strap you have it on. Personally, I'd be going for the bracelet, but that said, it genuinely looks great on the leather and on the NATO.
The Pioneer spirit lives on. Head to longines.com to discover the collection today and buy it online.
Alrighty, Felix, it's time to get back to the show. And we are back, and we are ready to talk to Bret Curry.
Yes.
He is a cinematographer and photographer who you definitely need to follow on Insta. He's most recently done some great work with Hodinkee on their magazine that we're hanging out for, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And past editions and some editorial stuff for them as well. He's also worked on a pretty recent doco-series called History of Horror.
Yep, nice.
As part of that, he captured Eli Roth, Rob Zombie,
Oh, my
Bill
fave.
Hader,
Yep.
Megan Fox.
Sure.
So some big names.
Yeah, nice.
Let's buzz him. Felix,
Andy Green.
we've got an exciting guest on the line.
Tell me more.
He has an IMDb profile.
Oh,
He's a
cool.
cinematographer / photographer / many other things. He's worked with people like Eli Roth, Casey Affleck, even Nat Geo.
Is Nat Geo a person?
Could be. Most recently, you might have seen him poking around Death Valley.
Oh.
Yes. We have Bret Curry on the line. Bret, welcome to OT.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. It's great to have you on board. We should kick things off with, because you are obviously a photographer, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But I think we should start with watches, because you're also a pretty big watch enthusiast. What I want to kick off with is where watches fit into your life.
Probably like 10 or 15 years ago, during college, I got into watches just as like a sort of, men's fashion thing / appreciating the just general mechanics of them. And then, doing a lot of, photography, and especially on the motion side, you always have to mute your phone while you're recording. So you usually want to have something like on you physically that you can kind of glance down at and kind of keep oriented where you are in your day. So that was kind of like out of necessity. That's another reason why I got into watches, especially dive watches. I love like the time bezel on them in terms of keeping time on set. So yeah, and then just, getting into it and the confluence of, watches and Instagram and everything, and you meet people like you guys and, my friends at Hodinkee, and it's just, it's a great community. It's a great little object, a conversation piece when you're in social situations, just to chat about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, clearly we've chosen to center our lives around it over here, but
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting, and it's often sort of forgotten about, that for some people a watch is still a useful thing. And I find that, if you're on a shoot, you've got your hands full. You can't just keep taking your phone out and checking the time.
totally. Yeah.
What was the first? Do you remember what that first watch that you bought was like? I need this to fill a function. I also kind of like it. Do you remember the model, or was it sort of lost in the history of time?
Well, it's funny because I think for probably since I was 18 to 25, I wore just one watch, which was the Seiko SNK 809, like that kind of simple field watch.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, really like that a lot. But it doesn't have any timing function, and I always saw a need for, some sort of timing function on set. So I ended up getting a Raven Trekker,
Oh yeah, cool.
which was kind of a micro brand out of Kansas City, and I'm from Missouri too, so I always thought it was kind of cool that they were from Missouri.
Yep.
So no, that was my kind of first foray into timing complications in association with my work. And then I don't know, I kind of I I enjoyed the timing complication, but I wanted the simplicity of what the 809 gave me. And learning more and more about watches during that period of
Mm,
time, I kind of came to the Tudor North flag as the
mm.
thing that I settled on. And so that's my like daily watch now, which doesn't have a timing complication, ironically. But I love the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah,
it's the best
it's yeah, I think it's an underrated watch in Tudor's sort
for
of
sure.
current lineup.
Hmm.
And I wonder if they're gonna do anything to sort of, pep it up a little bit. But I just wanna step back a sec to that Raven. That's a
Hmm.
pretty like, that's not a watch that you just sort of stumble upon, or maybe it is. How did you sort of work out that that existed?
It was just, I think a lot of times the funnest part of this sort of hobby or interest is the period of time before you purchase anything, just the research phase. And so, looking around on the internet, looking at sites like Hodinkee or Worn and Wound here in the US,
Mm,
and just seeing what was available in a certain price range, and just knowing what I kind of appreciated aesthetically, it kind of led me down the path towards the Raven. I think really it was James Stacy who
sure.
was uh,
All roads lead to James
all
Stacey.
all roads do lean to James Stacy for sure. No, he was pumping them on Instagram for sure, and so I think I followed his path.
He's personally sold at least 75% of the watches in the
Oh
United
no,
States.
it's true. Yeah, and with other things like Helios and Unimatic, and
Yeah.
yeah, James is great.
And chambray shirts as well. It's chambray
Yeah.
shirts and micro brand dive watches but they all deserve it. To be fair, we're
Well,
big
and
fans.
still kind of my, obtainable grail because of James is that 16570 Polar Explorer. I
Oh,
just
yeah,
love that so
same here.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great watch. It's a great watch.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, Felix, can we hit pause for a moment? I just need to top up.
What's in your cup?
Inglewood Coffee Roasters, of course. I've just finished my cup of their Ethiopian filter roast, which is perfect for my V60, but I think I might make a double espresso. This time I'll test out their Sunset Boulevard blend.
Yeah, good call. I'm busy chilling out with a coldie of their Ethiopian filter at the moment. Refreshing bergamot notes, sweet and tropicale. What's not to like?
Yeah, so here's the deal. Use OT30, that's OT30, for 30% off your order at checkout. On top of that, Inglewood Coffee Roasters offer free shipping on all Victorian orders and Australia-wide when you spend over $50.
Head to inglewoodcoffeeroasters.com.au to place an order today. We will link that up. OT the podcast, fueled by Inglewood Coffee Roasters.
In terms of, we talk about grails or things that you kind of have on your list that you want to own, what do you kind of think that you enjoy design-wise in a watch? Is it that sort of dive watch? Is it a field watch? Is it something simple like an Explorer 2?
I don't know. It is something simple like an Explorer 2, but I kind of gravitate towards, I don't know. The reason why I love the North Flag is it's kind of like a weirdo version of the Explorer. Um,
Yeah,
it's like it's just a slightly non-obvious version of something that's fairly traditional and fairly basic. Yeah, I kind of appreciate twists, like slightly toolish twists on established watches. So also love the Tudor Pelagos,
hmm,
especially the left-hand dial version of that, like the weirdest version of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to sort of look at it. And that's one I certainly sort of empathize with. Like, why get
Hmm.
the more, the example that most people lean towards when you can have one that's slightly quirkier.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
one thing I find interesting, sort of, given that your professional life is looking at pictures of things through lenses, how do you approach, especially as you've worked in watch photography, and how do you approach a watch that you want to wear? Do you, what am I trying to ask? Is the visual more important than the physical? Or do you have to sort of see it in person, or do you fall in love with it as an image first?
Well, you guys know this. I mean, more than anyone. I mean, the looking at a image of a watch online, blown up in macro scale, it just gives you really no indication of how it
yeah,
wears or how it looks in real life. So, yeah, I mean, you just in terms of what you're looking for, you just want something that feels purposeful, that feels like all the elements like come together as as one piece. And for me, I want something also I can bang around and not really feel too bad about. But also
yeah.
it's yeah. So I don't know.
How about this? How about this,
Yeah.
Brett? So I guess maybe think of it this way: does the way I watch photographs impact what you like in watch collecting or watches that you own? So flat sapphire crystals that don't have a bunch of reflection, or something
Mhm.
with really nice angles or really nice hands, or no cyclops. Like, does the aesthetics through the lens of a photographer's eye, or through the eye of a photographer, then translate to, I want to buy a watch that looks good in a photo, or do you just kind of
Well,
ignore all that stuff?
being kind of like a one watch guy for me personally, it doesn't
Uh-huh.
impact any sort of purchasing. But in terms of photographing, I don't know. I kind of like, if there's a, super reflective, bubbly bezel, then it kind of provides a challenge and also some sort of, interesting lighting phenomenon to play off of. Whereas if it's just like an anti-reflective, like flat
Hmm.
crystal that you can see straight through, or if you like throw a polarizer on and like really just kind of lose the glass altogether, it doesn't. It's fine. It's not necessarily more interesting or easy to shoot, but yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you were saying that. I was thinking of a watch that I've got recently. It's a Seiko sort of
Hmm.
diver, and it's again one that James Stacey's been hyping up.
Yeah.
Slightly different version, but so it's got a brown dial, but it looks beautiful on. But in photos, it's really really hard to capture because it's sort of a
God, especially brown
yeah,
dials.
it's
Those are, yeah.
brown and it's really sort of textured and it's sort of sunburst. But I kind of like that. At least I'm not capable of taking a good photo of it. Like I enjoy that it's, I appreciate wearing it more than I do looking at it on Instagram, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just did a shoot for Blancpain with their desert version of their 50 Fathoms
Oh,
Bathscaff.
yeah, it's a
And
beautiful shots,
yeah, and
by the way.
it has a really subtle, oh, thank you. It has a really subtle brown bezel to it. And that's something that we went back and forth on a couple times trying to get the color grade right on that to make it shine through, because it's just hard to not make it look black.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get to that in a moment, because
Yeah.
that's there's a big chunk of talking to be done there. Uh, just back to the shooting, using like functions that are useful when you're at work and kind of under the pump, or you glancing down. I imagine that an Apple Watch would be far too distracting, and that's why you go mechanical. Have there ever been times where you regret having the watch on your wrist because you're stuck in a maybe you're stuck in a corner for 8 hours filming someone eat a cake, and you just wish you didn't have that thing on your wrist to watch time go by?
That's really funny you mentioned that, because I think it was probably in late 2017 I did this show for Nat Geo, that I knew that I'd be sitting there, for hour and a half stretches just listening to interviews, basically. And so I got an Apple Watch during that production just because I knew I'd want to have something to look down and just check text messages.
Mm.
And that was a distraction for sure. I ended up, playing on that half the time. So that's when I returned to just a, physical analog watch. Um, yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to regret just having a analog watch on, but because you really can't take out your phone, or you really shouldn't
Hmm.
be. So yeah, I don't know.
You got to look professional.
No, yeah, totally.
Yeah. And speaking of professional, oh, that was a terrible segue, but let's leave it in there anyway. I want to get back to this photo shoot with Blancpain.
Yeah.
Um, Drive watches in Death Valley. What's the story and how are you involved?
Well, I got Hodinkee reached out to me because I've done a couple projects with them, um, specifically John Peabody and Brad Slavin and Stephen Pulverant, were developing the shoot with Blancpain for this watch. And the creative request was it be shot in Death Valley because that's where the watch was inspired by.
Hmm.
It was specifically inspired by aquifer in Death Valley that is called Devil's Hole, that some
Sure.
people have done some diving in, which is kind of insane. Um, which is inaccessible now, so we couldn't get to that, unfortunately, to
Oh,
shoot.
really?
But just general kind of, yeah, lifestyle photography in Death Valley. Now, when they asked me to do it, I think the day or two before that, it had reached 130 degrees there. Um, or maybe even more than that. It was like 135. I think it was the highest temperature ever recorded there. So I was like, is this the time to do this? But yeah, no, I guess it had to be done then. So yeah, we went into planning on that, trying to figure out exactly how we were going to get this done within the next, 2 or 3 weeks, and figured out that we could shoot from about 2 a.m. to maybe like 9:30 a.m. and then it would just get way too hot to be out there.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, went for it and did it, and it was a fun challenge and got some cool stuff.
So I just want to interrupt. So because I'm Australian and I live in the world of
Uh,
Celsius, 130 degrees Fahrenheit is 54.5 Celsius. That's
it's a
cooked.
it's absurd. Yeah, no, I think the day we were there, it only got up to 122 degrees
Only,
Fahrenheit.
sure.
I mean, it is
Yeah,
called Death Valley for a reason.
truly. And the funny
um,
thing, I mean, the thing about it is it would be such a pleasant place to shoot in the winter during, 75-degree weather. Because it's a national park here, and all our national parks are just, really well taken care of, beautiful roads, turnouts. So it's not the most extreme of environments in terms of being off the grid, but that heat was definitely a factor. So had to figure that one out.
so yeah, I can imagine. So you were shooting from 2 a.m. in the morning. How did you light the photos? Like, how did you combat the fact that you were shooting in the middle of the night?
Well, the really what we talked about creatively was just shooting, first light during the day and then the first
Uh-huh.
hour or two. But I didn't really. We drove from Los Angeles. We started off at like 9:30 p.m. and took us, I think, 4.5 hours to get out there. And you just kind of wanted to get out there and get oriented before we had to start shooting, because we had to make our way out to the dunes where the main chunk of shooting happened before
Mm.
it got light out.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, no, I kind of looked online and looked over the different points of interest in Death Valley and saw a bunch of night photos done at Badwater Basin, which is I think it's the lowest point in North America.
Hmm.
Um, Pretty cool, and it's just these big salt flats, and knew that I could probably get something done during the night. Whether they used it or not would be up to them. But yeah, no, I didn't end up doing any lighting. It was a full moon that night, and
Ah,
it was super bright. And I think I did um, about 15-second exposures on those, and just asked my model just stand very, very still. Um, yeah, no, and we got
wow.
we got some cool pictures out of it. But no, the chunk of the most of the shooting happened from, I would say, like 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m.
Okay, so you had a bit of natural light to help, because I would have
Yeah.
thought a 15-second exposure, getting any detail on a watch would be very difficult.
No, those were kind of more wide environmental portraits. Although I did have a flashlight. I had a Mouchant's Beagle with me,
Uh-huh.
and we did try to integrate that a little bit, and to varying degrees of success. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I certainly spotted it in one of the shots. That little, you can see the
yeah,
distinctive case.
they
It
ended
looked
up in
good.
the yeah, it ended up in the studio shots, and I have a friend named Josh Perez. He has a brand called Pedro and Taylor, and I snuck one of their hats in there as well. But yeah,
Nice. Oh, I mean, that
No, that's
all
very cool.
fits
uh-huh.
with the vibe. Is there anything? While we're sort of speaking about gear like that, I mean, I know you weren't there for the heat of the day, but you were
Yeah.
under some sort of time pressure. What do you have to factor in that sort of I guess that's a fairly high stakes shoot to sort of make sure that you're as ready as you can be and that you've got everything good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do the same thing that I do with motion shoots, which is just, make a general shot list and try to make a relatively loose, like half hour by half hour schedule of what you want to try to get. So that when you land on the ground, you kind of can get started and you're not looking around, just figuring out what the heck to do. But, basically all we needed to make sure we did is just drink a ton of water and shoot as many shots as we could while the temperature was still uh, not completely boiling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you learn anything about managing light? Obviously, anyone who photographs anything knows that
Hmm.
it's the desert probably sounds like the worst place ever, especially when you're trying to do product/editorial. Did you find any uh,
tips, or maybe you already knew the tips, you probably did because you're a professional, but managing light, full on to kind of get those high quality product shots. Did you have any sort of help there, any advice there for people who might, be shooting and, needing a hand with
Definitely.
diffusing the light?
Yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to watch photography, I think it's always good to keep like a 2 foot flex fill, like just something you can pop out and kill the reflection, or at least even out the reflections a little bit. So
Uh-huh.
that's something I kept with me. Although there were a couple shots where I just could not control the light, with given the crew that I had, which was just me and the model out there. And so I did do some face replacements from studio shoots.
Hmm.
But other than that, I think you see that on a lot of watch photographers. They'll use a flex fill and they'll hold it kind of
Hmm.
to the side to kill the reflections, and then you can integrate a polarizer if you need even more or even less reflection. Or there's some flex fills or you can take a piece of beadboard and cut a hole in the middle of it and just stick the lens straight through, and that's really good. Like
Yeah, that's what I did.
even
That's
product
what I
like,
did.
yeah,
I think
that's
I
the
learned that
move
from
for sure.
James Stacey as well.
Exactly. James comes back.
James comes back. When you say face replacement, that's I guess photoshopping the dial in from a
Yeah.
previous shot.
Yeah, and it's you kinda have
Ah.
to think ahead of time when you're shooting because it's extremely I with my limited Photoshop skills, if it's obliquely shot at all, it gets much harder to do the face replacements. So, we did it on, like, I think just 2 of the shots where they was just flat to the lens, and I wanted to control the reflections a bit more and make sure the hands were in the right spots and everything. Thankfully, they gave me I think I had 3 of their watches,
Hmm.
when I was shooting, so I left one at home to let the reserve run out, and that way I could set the time without it running the entire time and having to keep reset it when I did the studio shooting.
Oh, that's
But yeah,
clever.
which was really handy. But when we were out shooting on the dunes, I think we had probably 45 minutes of really super good light to shoot out there, so I couldn't really pay attention to where the hands were sitting. Uh, yeah, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So I know what you shot this on
uh,
because you posted it to Instagram just before. But what did you do this shoot with? It was 2 cameras, right?
yeah. So I shot with the Leica SL2, specifically with the 24 to 90 Varia Almaret lens of theirs, and then I shot with the Leica Q as well, which is I think my favorite watch shooting camera for sure, because that macro mode with the autofocus just makes it super easy.
Yeah, cool. And I think I get the sense that we're going to, Andy's champing at the bit to get into some proper camera talk. But I just want to, before we get there, I want to ask you what you actually thought of that Blancpain watch, if you had the chance to actually look at it as a watch rather than as a subject.
I did. Well, starting with the strap, just a really refined, like beautiful canvas strap. It was, I think, leather backed and really solid, perfect for the watch. I think it was. I really loved it. And then the watch itself, I think it's a 42 millimeter, if I remember right.
Around that.
And both me and the model have pretty dainty wrists, so
Hmm.
kind of worried about how that would photograph on us. But it was actually really nice. We got really used to it over the
And
course of the day.
the dial color was because that's sort of the big that's pretty
Yeah,
unusual.
it has a kind of a brown to beige sunburst. Really nice. I think the only real criticism I've heard of it is the day date, uh, which I
I
personally
mean,
like.
that's it's in the name. You know what you're getting
Yeah,
if
it's
you
in the
go to play.
name. You know what you're getting.
Well, I
Yeah,
think that's
fascinating.
like we said at the stop. They're lovely, really beautiful shots, and we'll have to sort of
Ah, thanks
link some up in the notes to all this so people can know exactly what we're talking about.
for
But
sure.
how sort of starting at the beginning of the photography side of things, how did you get into it in the first place?
I have a similar origin story to a lot of people in my generation, which is it kind of all centered around skateboarding and trying to find ways to like shoot my friends or film my friends skateboarding. So that's where it started. Kind of learned the technology through that application, and then just continued on, kept making things, and it's just a fun fits my personality, fits my interests. Just general the combination of mechanics with art is the best thing about it.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So you've shot some big names, especially recently. I think you've had some other exciting projects happening, but I've seen Bill Hader, Fred Savage, and Megan Fox pop up in your
Yeah.
Instagram feeds with some lovely shots you've taken on the Q2. What I want to know is how do you perform so well and get these amazing shots under what I imagine is not a lot of time and quite a bit of pressure?
Well, for the Bill Hader and Megan Fox shots that I did, those happened during the production of this show for AMC called History of Horror that I did with Eli Roth.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I mean the bulk of the production of that show is, hour and a half long interviews that kind of get cut and spliced with movie clips. Um, but at the end of those interviews, I have usually about 10 minutes to get both, what's called B-roll, or just general shots of them around the set, and also get some still shots with them. And so, yeah, you just kind of come up with, sitting there during that hour and a half of the interview, you're obviously, focused on shooting it, but also just kind of thinking through how am I going to utilize this 5 minutes I have with this person, and coming up with a plan and then executing as quickly as possible. Because you're right. It's like you have 5 minutes is generous. It's more like a minute to get those shots at the end. But yeah, just come in with a plan and you won't screw it up.
I think that's something that sort of applies for everything in life. Something
Yeah.
I've sort of wondered about with the sort of the photography cinematography split. What sort of division of your time is spent doing stills versus motion? What's the difference between the two from your point of view?
I would say probably, I mean, professionally, it's like 90-10. I do mostly motion and then, 10% stills, although it's kind of shifting, especially this year with the,
With
the constraints we
lockdowns and
have.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Having, smaller crews and leaner shoots is easier with stills work. But the main difference is that when it comes to motion, being a cinematographer or director of photography, either way you want to call it, I don't know, you're more insulated from either the the client or just the general, you know, uh, the general hassles that the directors and producers have to deal with. You can kind of focus on your craft a little bit more, if you want to call it that. Whereas, like as a photographer, I feel like you have a lot more integration with the creative and the client side. So that's definitely been kind of an interesting, contrast between those
Mm.
two. But yeah, no, mostly I do motion, and I just try to piggyback off of any production design or any actors that are happen to be on the set or any crew members, and try to take photographs of them. And
Smart.
yeah, yep.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Can you talk about your aesthetic and how it's developed over time? I know when I look at the work you've done, there's a lot of stuff around sort of neon lights. There's a lot of really interesting color that you pull out of the shots. There's a lot of use of shadow as well. But how have you kind of developed the Bret Curry aesthetic over the years you've been doing it?
I don't know. I kind of, I've always been into the sort of the style I shoot in, but I've sort of pushed it further and further out of maybe boredom, or
Uh-huh.
maybe a sense that there's a certain prevailing aesthetic that is a little bit bland or a little bit low contrast. And so I don't know. I don't know what it is exactly about that sort of just slightly heightened reality that speaks to me. I guess it's sort of like, I think of like David Lynch or people like that, where it's just some sort of like weird twist on normalcy that I
Mm.
like.
Do you
Yeah.
find yourself using post production a little bit more for these shots? Like I mean, I own a Leica Q as well, and I look at what you can get out the camera and what I can, and it's yours is about 100,000 times better.
Oh,
So I'm just going to blame Photoshop. But no, I'm curious to when you say elevate reality or kind of extend it or whatever you want to say. Is there an element of that where you kind of using your knowledge of post production software to kind of tweak things?
yeah. I think I don't think there's more than maybe 2 or 3 shots I've ever composited of multiple shots.
Uh huh.
So it's not necessarily Photoshop in the way that you might think of it. It's more Lightroom adjustment. So you have, gradient filters, you have selective color tweaking, so you can shift specific hues. I think that's one of my favorite tools
Mm,
to know I can play with is basically, if you want a hue of blue to be slightly more teal, or if you want a hue of orange to be slightly more pink or something like that, then you have those tools to play with. But yeah, no, it's like you can't really. I mean, you can to a certain point, but you can't fake everything in post. You have to
hmm.
kind of look out for certain situations that provide some sort of scene of heightened reality, and then just kind of push and tweak it in the directions you wish. But I'm definitely not. I definitely don't shy away from post manipulation, as you can see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
sure.
no, good.
You've got the old David Lynch preset there. Just plug it on.
Yeah.
And it's sort of talking about sort of style and aesthetic. I'm interested. Are you aware of, or do you sort of feel the need to keep up with like those sort of prevailing trends in photography or cinematography, or
I
do you
mean,
try and stick with your own vision?
I think it's totally a balance because like you have to keep up because clients or directors or individuals will request certain looks, and you have to be able to provide that. You have to kind of
Mm,
like at least note how to reverse engineer a look that they send as a reference.
mm.
But you also don't want to be looking at too many things or be basing your style off of what's popular at the time. So yeah, it's a mix of both for sure. You want somebody to hire you for what you can do and not for
Hmm.
what somebody else can do that you can just potentially recreate.
Yeah, interesting. So what I want to also ask you about, because so you've got, aside from the watch photography which we've talked about, if I had to categorize outside of the profile shots you do, it's these it's predominantly like landscape. I
Mhm.
think you would agree with, and then within that, there's sort of like what people would think of when they think of landscape, and you love shooting neon lights. Can you tell us how do you approach shooting sort of these neon lights and street signs, and then maybe landscapes as well? Because they're really, really good shots, and flickering neon lights is probably one subject to tackle, and probably something quite tricky. So I'd love to hear how you approach it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing about them is that they, um, I always look for whatever reason for 3 or 4, interesting elements for every frame, just so that the image stands on its own outside of context. Because
Uh huh.
I'm trying to do more photo series that have a context to them. It actually is kind of nice because it provides a little bit of opportunity not to make every photo like super epic. But when an image kind of has to stand alone, you have to look at composition, lighting, the context of what's in the scene, yada yada yada. And I don't know, I enjoy a certain kind of fading Americana. So
Hmm.
neon lights is definitely uh, a element of that. In terms of approaching shooting them, I mean, the dynamic range of the cameras we use are so massive now that you as long as you get the general scene exposure and you can push and pull the lights to control the saturation or the brightness. But yeah, no, it's really, it's kind of goes back to the sort of David Lynch sort of heightened reality, fading Americana kind of
Vibe.
taste. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably a good point to mention. You do have a print shop, which
Hmm.
is brettcurry.com. Your work and portfolios on there, but you do sell prints of a lot of these really cool shots that you take. And what I really love about the, I guess, street signs and Americana
Mhm.
style shots that you take is because, I mean, I've been to the United States once, but it's sort of, and as you say, fading Americana, it sort of tells this story of a place that, I've not been to very often. in a way that you kind of see it in the movies and you see it in films, and it's, I'm looking at one now that's the pink motel and
Yeah,
TV cafe and like
which
pre
is,
Wi-Fi
I mean,
days.
that's funny. That's one that's actually in Los Angeles, and it's in a really seedy part of town, and it is just used for film shoots. That you can't stay there.
Huh.
Yeah, I actually got yelled at when I was shooting it because I, I'm sure they want to collect their fee.
Yeah, just
Um,
rent it out.
yeah, but no, it's interesting. Like living in Los Angeles, you're surrounded by you know images of things that you kind of vaguely recognize from movies. It's a
Mhm.
weird place to live, and then. Um, my wife and I we're from Dallas, and so driving back and forth between there, you've heard of Route 66. That's kind of that's the route in between. It's I-40 now, but Route 66, the old Route 66, runs alongside I-40, and so a lot of those photos are from popping off the interstate and getting on the old highways, and shooting some of those old neon signs. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, cool, 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 cool. So we've talked about photography. We've talked about watches, and being a watch enthusiast, a watch collector, and a professional photographer. Where do you rate shooting watches in terms of difficulty? Ignoring shoots at Death Valley as a product themselves. Is it just me, or are they quite difficult to shoot?
They are they share a similar characteristic to shooting talking head interviews, in that you're dealing with a flat reflective surface, and often when you're shooting talking head interviews, you're dealing with somebody who has glasses who really does not want to take those glasses off.
Uh-huh.
So I've definitely learned some tricks from that situation to apply to the watch photography. You know, I don't find them particularly difficult to shoot if you have the right tools to flag off certain reflections and control the light.
Uh-huh.
They're super difficult to shoot if you don't have those tools.
What tools would you be referring to, or would you
Just
suggest?
just in terms of like for instance with this 50 fathoms shoot that I did recently. It was just one softbox flash kind of directly over that. The flash itself provided kind of a flagging off of the reflection and also a direction to the light,
Hmm.
which was nice. But there was still, different facets of the bezel that you wanted to control that you didn't want to say, be reflecting, the trees outside or whatever it is. So, it can be as simple as just like a flex fill or even just a piece of printer paper or something just to
Uh-huh.
place in the right spot. Um, yeah, no,
Is
it
a
doesn't
is
have to be fancy.
is a flash like that something you'd recommend for people sort of wanting to take their watch photography to the next level?
I
Is
don't.
that a cool
It,
piece of equipment?
it's definitely a cool piece of equipment to be able to control the directionality of the light. Um, Although if you have a window and even take a window and a bed sheet or something, if the light is hitting hard or take something more sheer, you can still get the same sort of soft quality of light without a photographic light.
Uh-huh.
Um, but no, it's just stuff to make things more efficient, basically. And yeah, I don't know. And typically when you're shooting like tabletops or something of a watch, you're on a tripod and you're able to stop down, so you don't
Mhm.
necessarily need it for the light. It's just a tool for efficiency, basically. Yeah.
And in your sort of wider practice, watches aside,
Mhm.
do you shoot film still, or is it all digital these days?
It's kind of half and half. I
Oh,
shoot.
really?
Yeah, I shoot. I mean, mostly 95% digital for professional or client work.
Hmm.
But it's always fun to like sneak in a couple film shots to those shoots. And then just for my personal work, I shoot a lot with the RZ67, which is it's a medium format camera from, I think they made it from 93 to 2004. So kind of the same era as like the Leica M6, although a little bit later.
Mm.
Just a really good like last hurrah of uh, a certain type of film photography. Yeah, I really enjoy shooting with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So aside from watch photography tips for, say someone's listening that maybe wants to become a photographer professionally, or they've got,
Mhm.
kids or family, do you have any advice or tips for someone looking to pursue that industry or that field?
Um, gosh, just I think the main number one thing is just shoot a lot of shots, like way more than you think you need to. Uh, anything I do, I mean, especially digitally, I'm shooting like a 20-to-1 ratio at least for stuff that gets thrown out versus stuff that I actually show.
Mm.
So that's a good thing. The Leica Q is a great camera for anyone at any experience level. I
Hmm.
know you have one, Andy, right?
Yeah, Q2.
A
Q2.
Q2. Yeah, that is that's a good easy tip right there. No, beyond that, just shoot as many shots as you can with whatever camera you have. An iPhone is uh, depressingly incredible at photography. It's so good now.
Yeah, when I worked with photographers in the past, my ongoing joke
Mhm.
is that I'll take an iPhone shot that's half good and then fire them, because what do professional
It's
photographers add to the equation that Steve Jobs hasn't?
just a headache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of sort of phones, I think this is a topic that is sort of implicit in photography these days. Instagram. Do you
Mhm.
love it or hate it?
I think it's probably the same for us. It's 50-50. I love it because we get to have this conversation. We met through
Hmm.
Instagram. I met so
Mm,
many people and so many people I work with through Instagram, and I love it because, especially in contrast to the like the TV stuff that I do, that that'll take a couple months in development, or even longer in development, and then a couple months in production, and then maybe a year before anybody sees the results of that. So having something like Instagram that people actually see versus a personal website, which
mm.
getting people to your personal website is harder and harder nowadays, but like having a place to actually put these images that people can respond to immediately, that's pretty awesome. Now the problems with social media in general are vast and
Broader.
many, broader. But overall, I mean, it's I think it's a net positive, at least in this context.
But for that sort of thing about you specifically as a professional photographer on Instagram,
Mhm.
do you think it makes people appreciate photography more, or do you find it in some ways, aside from the marketing benefits of it as a platform, do you find there's sort of it's harder to sell the value of your work based on people going, oh, I just want Instagram shots, or I don't need the
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's good that people are getting more and more. I mean, we all have such sophisticated, uh, visual eyes that we, have developed just from watching, TV and watching and seeing photographs for
Mm,
decades. But now the quality and the amount that of of images that people see nowadays, I mean, it's a good thing. I guess it pushes you to be better and better. It doesn't allow you to hide behind any sort of sense of uh, the magic of photography, because everybody has the tools in their pocket. So
Hmm.
your images have to kind of stand on their own. They have to be actually really good. um, yeah, no, I don't know. Lost my train of thought there, but yeah.
No, good answer. Good answer. So, what I want to know, Brett Curry, is what other photographers inspire you, past and or present?
That is a good question. Trying to think of who specifically are the main ones. Actually, there's a painter called Richard Estes that
Okay.
he does hyper realist paintings. You should look him up. It's you would recognize his influence on the stuff that I do. It's very colorful, lots of mid century. Yeah, I love him. Gosh, I'm so bad at like what is your favorite photographer or what is your favorite movie questions. I always
Just say
blank
Slim
out.
Aarons like everyone
Slim Aarons.
else.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Ansel Adams and Annie Leibovitz.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Roger
Tony
Deakins.
Kelly. Tony Kelly, maybe being in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. I'm looking at Richard. Was it
Estes?
Estes?
Very
Yeah,
hard to
Estes.
type, really.
yes. Yeah,
Ah, very
it's
cool.
really wonderful, and those paintings start from photographs. It's such an interesting. I love the result of those paintings, but the idea of his process is so intriguing.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So you've mentioned before that you like the limitations that your North Flag presents you,
Hmm.
and just sort of having the boundaries there. Photography is one of those areas where it's an endless stream of like new gear, new camera. The
Yeah,
Q2 comes out, the Q3 comes out, the new SL2 comes out. A new lens comes out that's slightly better, or we talk about flashes and diffusers and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that the reason you enjoy, say, the Leica Q so much is because, in essence, it has similar limitations? Like it's got that fixed lens. It does have a really good macro mode that's sort of really easy to switch over to, but it takes out a lot of the choice and decision making once you
that
have it.
is yeah, that is 100% why I love that camera. It is well, one. I mean, yeah, I guess if you enjoy a lot of context in your portraiture, a 28 is just kind of the perfect focal length. You could go up to 35, but once you go beyond 35, things start to fall off a little bit too much. And any wider than 28, you start to get, unnatural distortion. So yeah, I love shooting with the 28. I love the how sharp the lens is at 1.7, so you get almost a medium format quality to the images. Yeah, and just it's the perfect camera also to have with you when you're doing, not just when you're traveling, but when you're working on, say, a film shoot or something, and you have to, pay attention to your brain is kind of in the motion realm, and if
Mm.
you just want to like grab a shot real quick, you don't have to fiddle with focus or anything. You can just kind of swing the Leica Q around and stay in autofocus and just pop off a shot and then put it away and don't have to think about it. um yeah, but it's like you're right. It's the perfect combination of having all the manual control you would want, but essentially being a point and shoot camera as well.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's why I bought it. You pay a little bit more than,
Hmm.
say, maybe like a Sony or something, or a equivalent Canon, or whatever you're looking at. But what I didn't want was another deep rabbit hole, and Felix knows this about me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to open up a rabbit hole of like, oh, I can get the camera body, and then I'll get 5 lenses, because I knew in 6 months' time that would be 6 lenses and 10 lenses and all the other gear, and I would have far surpassed the spend of just buying a Q2.
Yeah,
Uh,
when I got my Q, I think it was early 2016, so it was like a couple months after it first came out, and I sold all my Sony gear. So I had the Sony A7 II, and then I had a
ah,
couple of the Zeiss Loxia lenses, which are like they're fully manual but modern lenses.
mm,
And I really like that setup, but I knew the Q kind of ticked all the marks, but it was kind of a one-to-one trade price wise. When I did it, and that's the great thing about the Q2 is you can get into basically what is a Leica M and a 28
mhm.
millimeter Summilux for half the price of what you'd pay if you bought those two things separate from each other, which is
Yeah.
cool. I mean, that's and they did really well with it because of that. Um,
So
yeah.
you use the SL2
Mhm.
as well. Who's the person that steps up from the Q2 to the SL2? Like it's that is a very serious camera. Is it, in your opinion, is that you're a full-time professional photographer? Uh,
I think so, but even in that context, it doesn't necessarily make sense over a Sony or a Fuji system. You kind of have
Interesting.
to. I don't know. There's the SL2 is beautifully designed. It has this. I don't know if it has the exact same sensor as the Q2, but it's pretty close.
Mm,
Um, and you can do all the things that you do with an A7 II or something like that. You can adapt like a M lenses to it, and there's fantastic system lenses. It's the L mount specifically for that. But I it's a refined product. It's like it has that like 5% more refinement than you know, or maybe 10% more refinement than say like a Sony system. And because of that, you pay a premium. Also, it's like the
Very
volume of
heavy.
those that they're selling is way less than Sony A7 II. So I'm sure that factors into it. But yeah, no, I loved using it. I love using it. I would like to own one. I'm just not sure I need to own one every day.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it's a
one of those.
serious
It's
piece of
kind of
equipment.
it's the same reason I don't own motion gear. It's just like I don't really need that sitting around the house collecting dust when I'm not shooting. I'd rather just rent it for the times when I do need it.
Very fair, very fair. Speaking of box tickers, you get around in a Volkswagen GTI.
Yeah, yeah, we've bonded a little bit over that. I don't know the most about cars, but I do know I like GTIs, and that is the right car for me at the time. We both have
You're right.
white GTIs, yeah.
Yeah, we both do. We both do. It's just a box ticket with birds of a feather. Is that the same?
Birds of a feather, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the theme that comes through when we talk to Bret Curry is you buying quality, but buying the right tool for the job and knowing how to use it. And I think the important thing here is that you can buy an expensive camera, you can buy an expensive iPhone, but there's a lot of work that goes into one, learning how to use this stuff, but also the composition, and we can't discount that. And I don't want to. But framing shots and composition and executing, and I think that's what sets enthusiasts apart from professionals like yourself. So I think that is worth calling out as we kind of wrap that part of the chat. Felix.
I'd just like to butt in. I think there's something else that separates enthusiasts from professionals in photography, Andy Green. Time management.
Okay.
Like Brett's been saying, he can get, great portraits of famous people in, seconds. That's what takes the years to learn, I think. You can have all the gear, but time management, it's what it comes down to.
That's so right, Felix. It's like
Hot takes.
I feel like that's the reason I get hired, is because I can just do things quickly, and that's the reason why anybody, like, if you're doing this professionally, you're doing it with extreme time constraints. So being able to execute quickly is the name of the game.
Yeah. Bringing it back to watches.
Love that. Felix?
What are we talking about, Andy?
Recommendations.
Oh, recommendations. Yeah, well, I've got one because I just sort of came to me talking about, Los Angeles and photography. But let's see. Do you have one, Brett? Have you been enjoying something?
Do you guys want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, Felix, go first.
I'll go first. Okay,
you go first. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, yeah, so it's funny because you were talking before about sort of the personality of Los Angeles, and you're sort of a Californian or a Los Angeles resident at the moment, Brett. And Andy's sort of only. Have you ever been to LA, Andy, or never?
Just the airport.
Just the airport. That's a lovely airport. But there's something that I sort of come back to every probably 5 years or so. It's kind of a movie, but it's called a video essay called Los Angeles Plays Itself. Have you ever seen this, Brett?
I have. It is wonderful.
Yeah, and it's basically a montage clip of Los Angeles on film. And the guy, who I assume is an academic or a professional in the area, just talks about how Los Angeles has changed on cinema, because it is, like you say, Andy, it's something that the whole world is really familiar with, but a lot of people have never been to. And it's that weird sort of, oh yeah, I think I've seen this before. Oh yeah, that's in Blade Runner. All that sort of, those moments you have when you go there. And it's hard to get, but if you can find Los Angeles Plays Itself, I would recommend it. That's my recommendation.
Okay. Geez, I didn't prepare one because I don't normally do one.
No, this just came up. You've recommended the Golf GTI. I think you're off the hook.
All right. No. I think we can recommend one of our friends who's just moved to LA with his tattoo studio.
Oh,
Maxime. Yeah, let's give Maxime a little bit of love. Who is he's a tattooist. He owns, he part owns Sang Blue Tattoo Studio, but there is a studio. Let me just look up the address. But if you're getting some ink, they're temporarily closed, but they'll be back up and running. They're in Los Angeles on Los Angeles Street. Sang Blue tattoos.
Listeners might know him from the Hublot limited edition.
Yeah. Obviously, they've done the work there, but so that's Maxime Plescia Bucci. Plescia Bucci. So he's now in Los Angeles, which is really cool. He was based sort of across Switzerland and London, but he's moved to LA, so he can get some ink from the great man when they open back up. They're right by the Toy District, by the looks of things. If you know where that is.
I don't even know where that is. I'll have to look that up.
A couple of blocks over from Skid Row.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, Brett, what about yourself?
Gosh, I don't know. I did not prepare. Well, this will be the least obvious recommendation of all time, but I'm going through Mad Men for probably the fourth time.
Cool.
Which is, just it's got everything you need, and it's a great escape for the crazy world we're currently living in, just to get to a different decade. So yeah, that's
comfort TV.
Go through it again. It's good.
Yeah, nice. Good call.
Yeah, love that. No, that's good. I don't even think I ever got through Mad Men the first time.
Shame.
Yeah,
I'll get to it.
I never did the final series.
Well, you're missing out.
You got the gist.
Admin, well-dressed admin. One of our past guests was on Mad Men, Felix. Miles Fisher. We'll link it up.
Oh, he was. That's right. Yeah.
He was. Great guy. Bret Curry, thank you so much for joining OT the podcast. Everyone needs to go follow you on Instagram at Bret Curry. That's Bret with one T, or BretCurry.com, spelt the same. That's a great URL. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to get you back sometime.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
And there we have it, Andy Green. That was our chat with Mr. Curry. A very interesting one about that. I've learned about photography. I've learned about famous people. I've learned about stuff, really. I feel better as a person. How about you?
What a guy. What a lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah. Do you know what else we need to do?
We need to thank our sponsors.
We also need to thank Bret Curry, to be honest. Thanks, Bret. So we've got some sponsors. We need to thank them.
We do.
We need to thank Inglewood Coffee Roasters. Be sure to use the code OT30 on checkout. You will get 30% off any coffee orders, free shipping in Victoria, free shipping in Australia, over $50. International, you're on your own. Also, thank you to Major Tom Media.
Felix will personally ship it out for you.
I won't. No. That's a lie. Thank you to Major Tom Media for making us sound as good as we always do. Andy, if people want to get in touch with us, how do they do it?
They can email us, otthepodcast@gmail.com, or DM us, ot.podcast.
Nice. And is there anything else we need to do before we close proceedings for the day?
Look, just a reminder, Christmas is coming up. Felix, Longines do have e-commerce on their site, longines.com.
Oh, good call, Andy Green.
All right. Put a pin in it.
Stick a fork in me. I'm done.
You were done a long time ago.